This is Reynolds Podcast, The Creative Mindset. Welcome to The Creative Mindset, a podcast about the art of building a career through conversations with the world's leading practitioners of creativity. It's an intimate journey on how they got started, their turning points, failures, and tips on work and life. I am your host, Ray Namoto, the founding partner of I & Co., a global innovation firm based in New York and Tokyo. Today's episode is part 2 of my conversation with Paola Antonelli, the senior curator of design at the Museum of Modern Art. In this episode, we get into the specifics of her work as a curator, how and where she finds her inspiration, where creativity comes from for her, and finally, the definition of creativity according to Paola Antonelli. Her definition of creativity was a refreshing and surprising one for me, and in a way, it was very Paola Antonelli. So let's get started. So speaking of shows that you've created so many shows, but if you had to pick key shows in your career, what would be?
There are many. The first one was very strong. It was called Mutant Materials in Contemporary Design. It was 95. And so I'm going to pick the ones that are important to me, not important historically necessarily. So Mutant Materials was very important because it was an exhibition that gave me a sense of confidence about, especially my display skills, right? Because it was a gorgeous show. It was not the topic was good. I had picked the topics of materials because in 95 there were all these new materials, and what was very important is that many of these materials could be designed by the designers themselves without going back to chemical engineers. So there were new resins that could be cured at ambient temperature, right? Or composites that you almost had to lay by hand. So there was a different agency on the side of the designer. So interesting topic and great, beautiful display and exhibition. So that gave me a really good sense of confidence. Also, it was the first and last time that MoMA let me do it, but most of the exhibition could be touched. So that was one exhibition that I feel was very strong.
I didn't realize that Mutant Materials was your first show. What do you think sort of helps you bring that kind of creativity to the way you curate shows? And, not just that one, but other things like the humble masterpiece that you mentioned, these everyday objects like paper clips and other things that people wouldn't necessarily pay attention to. Yeah. What gives you that creative edge?
Who knows? I mean, I know that I have a real passion for design. The creativity part, I really don't know. I mean, I studied architecture, but that does not explain everything. I think it's really like a personal, I'm sure that you have these different ingredients in your personality that define you and that you recognize too. Like, for instance, all of the art handlers that work with me at MoMA know very well. I put things with my eyes. I put things on the wall with my eyes, not with measurements. So it really is, it's very funny because they know it. They laugh, because they put something on the platform and I'm like, well, and they like, okay. And they just turn it and then I feel better. So if something is slightly askew, it doesn't block your imagination, right? If something is boom in front of you like this, where are you going to go? You're going to have to split your waves, right? But then it's also the desire to really explain in the most efficient way possible. So there's always really a desire to attract people's attention. And I think that the creativity that you talk about is almost like when flowers become really fragrant to attract bees. It's really a way to capture people's attention one way or the other so that they come to really appreciate design.
That's an interesting metaphor to talk about creativity. I don't think I've ever heard that kind of description or metaphor of what creativity is. So that's quite useful.
It's my creativity. Not all creativity is like that, but yeah, it's how I use it. Yeah.
So I want to switch the topic a little bit, and you talked about these key moments and turning points, and the shows that you remember well. But what about mistakes? What about failures? What failure can you share with us, and what did you learn from them?
Oh my God, I had a lot of rejections, but I can't remember any failures.
Well, if I may pick there. So rejections. Tell us a little bit. Yeah, what do you mean?
Well, just like shows that were rejected, proposals that were rejected that I'm really sorry about. So I also have a lot of far-fetched shows that were not accepted. That like Design and Violence, it happened as another project, or Broken Nature, it happened in Milan. But in that case, it was not a show that I wanted to do, but I felt that I had to do it to just like do something that was not as self-centered as everything else that I do.
Yeah. Is there a show that you had proposed but got rejected that you would love to resurrect?
Many. I mean, Broken Nature, I proposed it to MoMA in 2013 and it was rejected at that time. And then it became the 22nd Triennale di Milano in 2018, and then it came to MoMA afterwards. I'm trying to think of what else. Well, I proposed an exhibition on interspecies design 5 years ago and didn't go through. But many. I tell you, I think it's quite normal.
But it seems like, although you did have a lot of rejections, you keep a stock of them, and you don't, you find other opportunities to make them realize.
In some cases, in some others, no. In some cases, you say, okay, maybe it was not such a good idea. In other cases, you wait. In other cases, you find another place to do the exhibition. In other cases, it becomes, a documentary, a website. So it really depends.
What drives you? What drives your curiosity? What drives your motivation?
Well, my curiosity drives my motivation. Curiosity, really, it's this amazing curiosity, this idea of like adventure. So adventure to me means like, yes, going to Singapore, going to Bali when I've never been, but it also means going to Queens, to a restaurant where I've never been. So it's like, oh yeah, so Larry tells me, we're going to Flushing, there's this Hunan restaurant. I'm like, adventure, so immediately it becomes an adventure. So I love things that I don't know yet. So I guess what drives me is really a passion for what I don't know or what is not me.
Is it because of how your parents raised you? Is it, what gave you those qualities, do you think?
Well, I certainly grew up in a very stimulating environment intellectually. My father and mother are both doctors. My dad was a surgeon and he also was a professor and ran a hospital. My mom was a blood analysis expert, and both had other interests. My dad was like paid for his university by playing jazz piano and correcting proofs of newspapers. My mom was doing her things, So it was always no holds barred, and it was also very demanding in terms of standards. So maybe a good part of it was taught, or at least I was given the freedom to investigate, right? Nobody ever stopped me. And even when I started going to foreign countries, like very often it happened, kids of my generation, every summer we would be sent to a different city in Europe to learn the language for at least a month and a half. And very comfortable with languages that I didn't know and places that I didn't know.
What drives your curiosity?
I am like a vampire. The best way for my spirit to be lifted is to do a studio visit with a really great designer. But it is to be a great designer. If it's not a great designer, I become more depressed. But if it's a great designer, I'm just thinking, one of the best studio visits I've had lately is with Annie Liu. She's a wonderful artist. And so, a visit with Annie, fantastic. That really, it's like a vampire, seriously. Otherwise, it's not easy. Maybe music can help. And I just other people's creativity, right? Or an amazing movie, something that really makes me think like, how did you think about this? Something that really surprises me for its creativity.
To the extent that you can share, what's next? What do you have in your plan in terms of your show? What's next?
There's so much going on. So I just opened an exhibition that's called Never Alone, that is about the video games in MoMA's collection. So in 2010, I started collecting video games from MoMA. And there are now 36. We collect like slowly, deliberately. We had to decide the protocol, the criteria. There was a lot behind it. And so this exhibition just opened. It's about interaction design and the video games in the collection. Then I'm going to keep on going with my project Design Emergency, that is with Alice Rawsthorne. Alice Rawsthorne is, as you know, foremost design critic, and she's one of my best friends. And we've been doing together this survey. We started in April 2020, so during the pandemic, and it's called Design Emergency because at the beginning we were interviewing on Instagram all of these designers that had to do with the pandemic, and then it keeps going on Instagram. And then also we published, first we did a special issue of Wallpaper magazine, then we published a book, and we keep going with that. I am very good as a movie director. I'm very good as a leader of a team because I somehow really trust the people that I work with. When they demonstrate that they are trustworthy, I trust them completely. So many of the people that I work with, like engineers, electricians, etc., or audiovisuals people, they always laugh because I look at them and they say that something is difficult. And I tell them, oh my God, you're so going to get it done, I'm sure. And I mean it, And so by making people feel that they have it, that they're going to make it, they do. So, and I really get very, very good in situations of great pressure. I just become cold and calm, and I just make everybody feel like it's going to be just fine. So there's a lot, and I want to reprise a project that I've been working on for way too long. I'm not even going to tell you how long, about food as design, so I want to reprise that. So there's always never a dull moment. The ideas are too many. That's the problem. Yeah, ideas are $1 a pound. It's making them happen that is really tough.
This was the second part of my conversation with Paola Antonelli. As usual, I like to share my 3 takeaways from this conversation. Takeaway number 1, creativity is like flowers becoming fragrant to attract bees. Number 2, success is a function of rejection. And number 3, ideas are $1 a pound. Takeaway number 1, creativity is like flowers becoming fragrant to attract bees. As I said at the beginning of this episode, I found this definition by Paola very Paola in that it was something that was unexpected. It was different from any other definition that I've heard from anybody else. Creativity is one of those words that is quite difficult to define because it can contain many different meanings and it could mean different things to different people. In her case, because of the line of work that she does, which is curating design for an exhibition and for an audience, and the way she uses creativity is exactly like she said. It's like the flowers becoming fragrant to attract the audience to that flower. So in a way, the show itself is the flower, and that fragrance that comes out of the flower is the creativity for her in curating shows. And again, I thought that definition was very different, but it gave me a new way to think about creativity. And as a curator, that's exactly what she does, which is to bring a new perspective to look at the world. Number 2, success is a function of rejection. When I asked her about failures in her career, she actually said, "Oh, I don't have any failures," which surprised me, but it was quickly followed by, "Oh, but I've had many rejections." As a curator, and even though she's one of the top curators in the world, she still has to come up with new ideas for new shows that she would want to curate. And she still has to submit that to the MoMA where she works and or other organizations and other events that she might be curating for. And those shows or the ideas for those shows would have to be accepted by different organizations. And apparently, she has had many, many rejections, and she still has a lot of shows that haven't realized. But, she wasn't crying over those rejections. And she had a very relaxed view on getting rejected, which I thought was quite encouraging. So, for somebody as successful and as well known as Paola, she's had many rejections, and that's why she succeeded. So number 2, success is a function of rejection. Number 3, ideas are $1 a pound. This is a fairly common expression, I think. And, this is meant to say that coming up with ideas is the easy part. The really, really hard part is putting those pieces together to bring the idea to life. At least, coming up with ideas, you can come up with them in your head. So the only limitation that you would have is your imagination. But making those ideas, bring them to reality, bringing them to life, requires tenacity, requires connection, requires money, requires time, requires a lot of different things and different pieces of the puzzle that you have to put together. And that's really the hard part. So, when I was a young designer, I think I used to be quite precious of my own ideas, and I didn't want to reveal those things were. But as I've aged and as I've become more experienced, I've become accustomed to ideas getting killed many, many times. So this notion of ideas being $1 a pound, it's something that's cheap and, you shouldn't feel precious about, is a very sage piece of advice that we should all, we can all learn from. So to summarize, 3 takeaways. Number 1, creativity is like flowers becoming fragrant to attract bees. Number 2, success is a function of rejection. Number 3, ideas are $1 a pound. That was part 2 of my conversation with Paola Antonelli, the senior curator of design at the Museum of Modern Art. For those of you listening to this podcast in English, I should reveal that this podcast is being produced in English and Japanese. Obviously, these conversations are recorded in English, but what we do is we translate the English conversations into Japanese, and we broadcast the Japanese version of these episodes first in Japan, and then we produce the English version that you're listening to. To review a little bit of behind the scenes, the 2 episodes with Paola happen to be some of the most popular episodes of this podcast. So I hope you enjoyed listening to Paola's episodes as much as I did and as much as the audience in Japan did. Next up is my conversation with John Maeda, the design technologist and often referred as the Yoda of design. The conversation with him is as educational as it is enlightening, so stay tuned. I am your host, Ray Inamoto, and this is the Creative Mindset. See you next time.